so many trains running in here right now. So much nostalgia. We have to do a whistle battle. Vintage versus modern. This is not going to be a fair fight.
The MPC era had cylinder steam. Welcome back, folks. Hope you're having a great week. Brace yourselves, because this week's video is the battle between modern and vintage trains. That's right, you heard me. This week, we're going to look at some of the differences between modern and vintage O-gauge trains. And I have selected 4 train sets for this video: the Daylight, the Blue Comet, the Southern Crescent, and the Norfolk and Western 611. Why these 4, RBP? I don't know. I just like these. Who knows? Or maybe it's just because I happen to have a vintage and a modern version of each. It's my video, right? Right? And I have carefully paired each modern version with its vintage counterpart. Pretty cool, huh? The battle of the train engines. I don't want to do that. I'm going to break something. Huh? Modern? Vintage? To be honest, I like them both. Now I have to clarify what I mean when I say vintage trains for this video, because Lionel goes way back. I mean, way back to the turn of the century. The 4 vintage trains I've picked tonight are from the era better known as the MPC era of Lionel. What does that mean, RBP? We've done a couple videos on MPC in the past, but to give you a quick refresher, this era refers to the trains that were built between the years 1970 to 1986. As someone who was born in 1985, I guess I'm MPC era. On the modern roster tonight, I have 2 sets that are made by Lionel and 2 sets that are made by MTH. We're keeping it equal here. Let's check them out. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Before we start this video, I have a special announcement. The moment we have all been waiting for. It's the 2023 RBP and Friends video. Finally, I know, it's taken me a long time to do the announcement. Thank you for all the comments, and I am sorry that I made you wait this long. What is RBP and Friends, you say? This gives you the chance to send me videos of your collection, your layout, your setup, your favorite train engine, and you will have a chance for it to be featured in my 2023 RBP and Friends compilation video. If you want to see the one from last year, I will link it right here, or here, whatever side of the screen Google puts it on. All I ask when you send in your video is that you email it to me at rbptrains@gmail.com, right here on the screen, your name and a little bit about your layout or your collection. If you don't send me any information, chances are you might not be featured. I want to be able to tell a little bit about what I'm showing. I will be taking the submissions through the end of May. So that's going to be May 31st will be the deadline for your video. So make sure you email them to me by May 31st. Got it? May 31st. rbptrains@gmail.com. I'm looking forward to going through all of these videos. If it's anything like last year, it's going to be a lot. But that's okay. Back to the topic at hand. Where was I? Modern versus vintage. That's right. Let's go. I enjoy collecting modern and vintage trains. Vintage trains bring about the nostalgic side of the hobby. O-gauge has been around for a long time. And these vintage trains are really a key to the past. And it's just kind of neat to see the evolution of these trains over time. I think a lot of us connect to that side of the hobby. All the feels. The nostalgic feels. MPC is a really popular era these days. Not only do these trains look neat when they're all assembled, they're very uniform for their semi-scale size, but they're also really affordable. So it's a great way to expand your collection without breaking the bank. But don't get me wrong, because modern trains are something to behold. Scale proportions, tons of details, big sounds, smoke units. I mean, we've done so many modern trains and they are amazing. But without vintage trains from the pre- and post-war eras, and eras like the MPC, we wouldn't have the trains we have today. So for me, there's something special about this era when it comes to O-gauge collecting. Let me know what your favorite is. Leave me a comment. Do you prefer modern trains or vintage trains?
Let's take a look at two of the models we're going to be comparing tonight. I have a sample of the modern scale engine. This is a Lionel Legacy model of the Southern Pacific Daylight steam engine. And right over here, we have the vintage version. This is the MPC era Lionel Daylight steam engine. Right out of the gate, you can see the size difference between the two engines. Most of the vintage engines are what you call semi-scale, which means they're not 1/48 scale proportions, which is what most O-scale engines are, like this one right here. It still runs on the same 3-rail track, but it uses conventional methods of operation. What does that mean? It means that I use my variable voltage transformers to control the speed by raising or lowering the amount of voltage to the track. But the way I run them together is my tracks are isolated. So we have our command engine here. This is using the Lionel Legacy control system. And our vintage engine right here is going to be using variable voltage, which is way over here on this handle. As you can see right there. The most glaring difference are the appearance of the engines. As you're seeing, the size is different, the details are different. But again, remember, without this engine here, we would never have had this engine right here. One of the most fun things to compare between the vintage and the modern engines are the sounds. And what I mean by that is that the engines from the 1970s and the early 1980s featured something that Lionel called the mighty sounds of steam, which really sounds like the mighty sounds of static. But not only do we have some of that sound in this engine, it also has the electronic whistle. Let's listen to some of these sounds. This is your mighty sound of steam, sound of the steam letting off the engine. And we have that famous MPC era whistle. Remember that these are very early sounds, so we have to appreciate the fact that this doesn't have a bunch of computerized chips. This isn't high fidelity audio. The high fidelity sound is something you're going to hear in this engine right here. Now, being a Lionel Vision Line engine, this actually has 3 speakers in it. 1 in the engine, 2 in the tender for a stereo effect. Listen to this whistle. Hold up. You know what this means, don't you? We have to do a whistle battle. Vintage versus modern. Let's start with our modern Lionel Vision Line GS. It's gonna be hard to beat. And now our vintage train engine. Yeah, I don't think this is fair. Leave me a comment. Let me know. Which one was your favorite? The modern Daylight or the vintage Daylight?
The 4 steam engines on the MPC side of things are part of what Lionel referred to as the famous American Railroad series, or FAR. Tomato, tomato, it's kind of the same thing. But believe it or not, these were considered to be premium sets in the 1970s and the 1980s. Look how far we've come. And that's really what I want to do tonight with this video. We're going to look at where we've been and where we're going. But along the way, we're going to celebrate both. We're going to start off with one of my favorite sets, the Blue Comet. This vintage Blue Comet steam engine was manufactured between 1978 and 1980. And it's considered to be one of the more scarce and collectible engines of the MPC era, which is no surprise because the Blue Comet is so different. These blue colors make it stand out in literally any collection. I have it coupled up to these Baby Madison passenger cars, and these are the cars that were made for the engine back in the 70s. If you own one of the modern Lion Chief Polar Express semi-scale sets, these plastic Madison cars may just look familiar to you. The scale Blue Comet that you're seeing is by MTH, And this is a Premier Protosound 3 model, so this is the latest and greatest MTH technology. The Scale Pacific is hooked up to these 4 Madison cars, and this actually came as a boxed set. So lucky for me, I was able to get the whole thing in one clip. And this was the first MTH Premier set I ever got. I think I've said that before. Probably sound like a broken record these days. RBP repeating himself. Losing my mind. Next on our list, we're going to look at the Southern Crescent set. On the MPC side of things, our vintage engine is the Southern 8702 that Lionel made from 1977 to 1978. So this one's very similar to our Blue Comet. Kind of wanted to keep these ones together since we just saw the Blue Comet with the baby Madison cars, and now you're seeing the Southern Crescent pulling the same type of Madison cars, just with the green paint. This engine features that same chuffing technology, but it does not have the electronic whistle or the cylinder steam that we're going to see in the next 2 models. The Southern Crescent is not as rare as the Blue Comet, but it is still a beautiful train to have in your collection. Running next to our semi-scale Southern Crescent is the Lionel Legacy version. This Pacific is just beautiful. The passenger cars behind this Lionel Legacy Pacific are made by Atlas. I don't think we've given this engine much runtime. It was in my fastest passenger trains video, and I think that was pretty much it. Next on our list is the famous Norfolk Western J-Class 611. The MPC era 611 was manufactured in 1981, and this one pulls out all the stops. Not only does it have the mighty sounds of steam, with a synchronized chuffing, and of course a puffing smoke unit, Lionel added an additional set of feeder tubes in the front so that it exhausts steam through the cylinders. Cylinder steam and an engine from 1981. On the scale side tonight, we have the MTH Premier PS3 version of the Norfolk Western J-Class 611. This is the excursion version of the 611 as you would see it today. The passenger cars you see behind our scale 611 are all made by MTH, and they came in a set. For anyone who had an opportunity to see the 611 run in Strasburg, Pennsylvania over the last couple of years, I also wanted to include some recent footage of this scale model pulling the Strasburg passenger cars. This way you can see it with its native cars and, of course, the excursion cars that it ran over the last couple of years. Last on our list tonight is the MPC Daylight. Now, why did I save this one for last? It was not random. It was not by chance. As of the making of this video, the MPC Daylight is still the most desirable steam engine from that era. It just barely edges out the Blue Comet and the 611. Lionel produced the MPC era Daylight in 1983, so it's the youngest of all the MPC engines we've looked at. The Daylight features that same technology that we saw in the 611 though. It's built on the same frame. As you can see, it's the exact same model, just with a different paint scheme. So we have the mighty sounds of steam with the electronic whistle. And we have that smoke unit that not only goes out the stack, but also goes out the cylinders. So there's that cylinder steam. And when I thought about cylinder steam and the comparison of the Daylight to its modern counterpart, I had no other choice but to compare it to the Lionel Vision Line GS series. The GS series is one of the coolest Lionel Vision Line engines in the last couple of years. Why do I say this? Well, the GS series that Lionel produced had a couple of new features when they were released. You had the multiple whistles that you could pick from. We had that newer crew talk, but we also had some really cool smoke effects, like cylinder steam. If you look at this Vision Line GS series right here, this is a GS5. We'll also run the GS2. These both have that reciprocating steam effect, which is just amazing. But it's not new, as we just saw. In 1981 and 1983, Lionel was already working on cylinder steam. Maybe it was more basic, but the idea was there. What's really cool though is that now Lionel has taken that fan-driven smoke unit, that electronic synchronized chuffing sequence, and created reciprocating cylinder steam. This is like the coolest feature when it comes to smoke effects that Lionel has done ever. So again, I ask, are you a modern or vintage collector? Let me know in the comments. Always interested to hear what you're collecting or what interests you about O-gauge model railroading. As always, a huge thank you to all of my subscribers and everyone who's been supporting this channel. My name is Chris, and this is RBP Trains. We'll see you next time.